In this video, we're going to be looking at the operations with integers. We're going to add integers, subtract integers, and multiply and divide integers. When looking at integers, we're looking at both the positive and the negative, or what it also could be known as the additive inverse, or its opposite. When adding integers, one can look at it as on yardage gain and loss from a football game. If a player starts at the 20-yard line and moves forward 10 yards, that would be a plus 10. But then if the player loses 5 yards because of a penalty, it would be a minus 5. So what we would have is 20 plus 10 plus negative 5. When we do this, you'd go 20 plus 10, which is 30, plus a negative 5, bringing us down to a negative, or to 25. It took us backwards 5 units. That is one way to look at adding integers. Another way of looking at adding integers is more of a chemistry example. If I have 3 plus negative 2, I could look at this as I have 3 positives. I have a positive, and a positive, and I have 2 negatives. A positive and negative cancel each other out, leaving me with a single positive of just a plus 1. If I have 3 plus negative 5, a positive, 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 negative, 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 and negative. Positive negatives cancel each other out, leaving me with 2 negatives remaining. That's another visual example of how to see how to add integers. Subtracting integers is very similar to adding integers, with the biggest difference being the sign in the middle. If I have 5 minus negative 3, I want to put the negative 3 inside parentheses to help me remember that that negative goes with a 3. What happens though is I have what could be known as a double negative. This, when I subtract, I'm looking for the opposite. So I now have 5 minus a negative. What's the opposite of a negative? Because I'm going to be doing the opposite. So the opposite of a negative is a positive. So I could have 5 plus 3 using the fact that I'm looking for the opposite or the additive inverse of that number. If I had 5 plus negative 3, then that goes back to the adding of integers. And one might say that adding a negative is the same as subtracting a positive, because I could write this as 5 minus 3, which is 2. 5 plus negative 3 is also 2. Subtracting integers, adding integers, if it's a negative sign, change the sign on the number, change the sign on the operation. So if I had 4 plus negative 3, I could rewrite that as 4 minus 3, which both of those equal 1. For the subtraction, 4 minus 3 would be the same as 4 plus negative 3, which still equals 1. Subtracting and adding integers, once you understand the concept, can be fairly straightforward. It does run into its hassles though when you lose track of how to do it. Multiplying and dividing integers does not change much from how you multiply normal numbers. 5 times 3 equals 15. This is a multiplication of two positive integers. I have 5 groups of positive 5 multiplying, or I have 5 objects 3 times over. So I'd have plus, 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 and then another group of plus 5, and the last group of plus 5, giving me a total of 15. When I multiply signs that are different, 5 times -3, prefer to use the parentheses instead of the x multiplier because of the confusion that the x can bring during algebra. What this is saying is I'm going to have 5 groups of -3, giving me 15 negative objects. When my signs are the same, the signs stay. When the signs are different, it is negative. When I have a positive times a positive equals a positive, and negative times a negative equals a positive. This is the only time in math or in life, it happens in math all the time, that two negatives make a positive. Anytime you multiply two negatives together, you will always end up with a positive answer, which is one reason why in one of our previous videos when we were talking about real numbers and we touched on the imaginary number, if we have the square root of 64, that equals 8 or -8, because -8 times -8 equals a positive 64. So two negatives multiplied together become a positive, two positives multiplied together become a positive. If I have a positive times a negative, it is a negative, as well as if I have a negative times a positive, it is also a negative. So if the signs are not the same, it will be negative. If the signs are the same, it will be positive. It is the same as well for division. When I look at having a negative divided by a negative, it is a positive. When I have a positive divided by a positive, it is positive. But if I have a negative divided by a positive, it is negative, or a positive divided by a negative, it is negative. So multiplying and dividing behave the same way. With numbers, you just have to look at the leading sign of how it behaves.